When it comes to building projects, screws are always a quick and easy way to go. Whether you're going with just a regular old screw or even just a pocket screw, you see them everywhere. However, today we're going to do a project that is a very simple and easy project, but we're going to do it with dowels instead of screws. I feel like dowels are just something we don't see used a whole lot, and honestly I feel like that it's something that we think is actually harder than it really is. And today I want to show you how you can get started and you can start building projects using dowels without a bunch of fancy equipment, and honestly you can do this just about cheaper than you can buying a pocket hole jig.
So today's project, we're going to be building a stocking stand. Because we don't have a fireplace, this seemed like a great solution. I did find this project on Pinterest from Anna White. She's one of the OGs. Now today we're going to be using pine 2x4s because that's what we had on hand. You can use any kind of lumber. I liked the idea of possibly using walnut, but I know me, and we're going to be starting this project today, but in a couple of years I may want to paint this, so can't really paint walnut, you know what I mean? So
we're going to be sure and put a cut list in the description below, but essentially this is just a couple of legs, a couple of stretchers in between, and a couple of feet. You can build this with two 2x4s, and we're going to start with the stretchers in between. We want the overall size to be about 48 inches long, and because we're using 2x4s, they're 1.5 inches thick, so the two end pieces are going to take up 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches, about 3 inches there. So the stretchers in between, we're going to make them about 45 inches long. Now the two leg pieces that we've got to cut are going to be 32 inches long, and then our feet are going to be 10.5 inches long.
So keep in mind, if you're using construction lumber, you obviously want to find the straightest pieces, but sometimes you get home and maybe something has twisted. You can cut out your smaller pieces from that. You just cut that twist off and, you know, throw it in the garbage. Now, obviously, if it's a really major twist, you don't want to use it, but you can cut your shorter pieces out of it.
Another thing to remember when using construction lumber is that you typically have the stamps to contend with, where they've stamped on the board that it's a stud or Douglas fir or whatever. So you're going to want to sand those off unless you're painting your project. In our case, we're going to cheat and we're going to run them through the planer.
So even though we did run this through the planer, we are going to go ahead and lightly hit it with the sander just to knock off any of the planer marks that may have been left behind. And then it's kind of easier to do it now before it's assembled.
So this gives you a little bit of a mock-up of kind of what we're dealing with here. This, like we said a minute ago, it's a 6-piece project. Now, we're going to begin working on putting holes in the ends of these for our dowels. So to do this, what we're going to need is, first of all, a doweling jig. Now this is a doweling jig. This is called the Dowel 1000, I believe is what they call this. And this thing is fantastic, and it's a self-centering doweling jig. And what that means is that when you take it and you put it on a piece of wood, you're able to take and you clamp this down. You just screw this little, turn this little screw here, and when you do that, it automatically centers where you're going to be drilling this on the piece. So that makes this part super handy. This thing, I want to say, runs about 50-ish bucks or so on Amazon. I will put a link up for it. Like I said, I'm very happy with that. I've been using that for a while. Works great. Also, you're going to want to get one of these drill blocks, because what's going to happen is here in a minute, we're going to be drilling into the wider part of this, and that jig is not actually wide enough to go across this. So what we're going to want to do is we'll use one of these drill guides, and that will help us to do this.
If you have a drill press, you don't need this. But realistically, we know that not everyone has a drill press, so we did want to show you this tool.
Also, these are some little, they're called like a dowel centering pin. will want these, and you'll see why here in just a little bit. These are fairly cheap. These are from Miles Craft, as well as this little drill guide. Anyway, those are a few things you're going to need. A 1/2" bit is what we're using on this with 1/2" dowels. Now, you can buy like fluted, like pre-cut little dowels, or you can just buy a dowel rod and cut it up. You may have to sand it a little bit though, because sometimes the sizing is not always perfect. So I'm starting out here on the top. I'm just going to make a couple of marks, and I'm coming in off of each side about 1 inch, and that's going to be what is going to line up my 2x4 when I stand it on the end here. I'll just kind of put it on that line, and that'll get me pretty close to where I want it to be. I'm also going to make sure that I bring it up here and I flush it up, because like I said, this is the top, and so this end needs to be flush. So on this end here as well, now this is the end of the 2x4. I'm going to do the same type thing. I'm basically just going to kind of put a little mark about 1 inch or so in each end. You could do this with a tape measure or whatever. And this is going to be where I'm going to line up for our dowel jig. And our dowel jig here, the way that this thing works is it has multiple different sizes here. For different size bits and different size dowels, and it's also labeled right here. We're going to go all the way to this farthest one. This is the 1/2" side here. It's kind of hard to probably see, but on the inside of there, through these little sight windows, there are lines that line up with each of the drill bit holes, so you know where to line this up. So I'll end up lining up this mark with this mark here, and that's how I'll know exactly where to drill. Okay, so now that we've got this in place, we're gonna go ahead and drill this out with our 1/2" bit. I put a piece of painter's tape on here, and basically this depth here is 1.5 inches. So I added 3/4, because that's about how deep we wanna go to that. And honestly, in my opinion, if you do anything, go a little bit deep on your hole.
Oh, behave. Yeah.
Rather than too shallow, because if you do, what you're going to find out is that it won't close up all the way, because the dowel will hold it out. Okay, now this is where our centering pins come into play. And the way that these centering pins work is you just put these in the hole. Like that. Now we're going to go ahead and lay our piece back down. I'm going to grab a little scrap here to basically bump this up against, so that I know where I'm hitting. When I'm pretty happy with where that's going to go, and all I got to do is just push it down. Now, you can easily see this little pin here where that made the mark. It's going to be a little harder over here in this knot. That's kind of unfortunate, but we'll work around it. Okay, so we did manage to figure out exactly where that was at. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the point of our bit, we're going to line it up, and we're going to start drilling. Now this is going to be, like I said, this is unfortunate because we're going into this knot, so I don't know what's going to happen. Now that we've got it kind of started, we'll just stop there. Come up to this other one, do the same thing. That's where our little drill guide's going to come into place. So we're basically just going to rinse and repeat for the bottom stretcher. The only difference being is that we're going to bring it, and we want to make sure that it is raised up off of the bottom. We don't want it to be all the way down at the bottom. So we're going to bring it up. You could take a 2x4 and use that as a measurement. if you choose to buy full-length dowel rods and cut your own dowel pins out, you want to be careful and not just cut them on any old saw. You're not going to be able to do this really on the miter saw because it's going to shoot it across the room. You're probably going to want to do this on something, either a hand saw, or I like to use this band saw, but you can do this with a hand saw. I also like to sand these just a little bit around that edge a little bit, so when I put this dowel in here, it just helps it to go in a little bit easier. And we're going to lightly just kind of dry fit this together here and just make sure that we're going to be happy with everything before we put the glue to it. I think that knot didn't really do us any favors, but hopefully we can still make it work. And the next step is going to be staining and putting a finish on it. However, we have kind of last minute decided we're going to add like a little cap on top of this. So that was not really a part of the plan. And we are going to cheat on that. I think we're just going to shoot that in with some 18 gauge finish nails. That's pretty much going to be the simplest way to do that. It's just going to be like a 1x4 across the top there. It'll be a place that Jess can hang garland and little cutesy stuff like that. So really we're just using a Minwax provincial stain here for the color. And then once we get done with that, we will move on to a spray polyurethane. And we're just doing this with a rattle can spray. It's a little bit expensive. It's about $10 a can. And we did that in Minwax in a semi-gloss. And again, it's not something you'd want to use for a huge project because of the price. But for something quick and simple that has a lot of nooks and crannies, this makes it very simple. After that, find some hooks that you like and attach them. We picked these up at Hobby Lobby for about $3 a piece, and they were on sale like a lot of things are at Hobby Lobby. So after you've done that, this thing's ready for Christmas.